They came to harvest humanity. They crossed humanity's border with confidence. They left in lifeboats, far beyond the edge of the Sol system, past the cold dark where no star gave light. A fleet gathered. It was not a small fleet. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers, ship after ship, silent and patient, waiting for the order to move. The fleet belonged to the Corvette Dominion, a group of species that had ruled a large part of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. They did not fight wars anymore. They did not need to. When the Corvette wanted something, they simply took it. The being who commanded this fleet was named Threl Vosen. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devouring Light, looking at a large screen that showed a small yellow star system far ahead. On that screen, a blue and green planet turned slowly. The screen said the planet was called Earth. The species that lived there called themselves humans. Threl Vosen had read every report about this species. He had studied the old radio signals that had leaked out from Earth many years ago. Music, television shows, arguments. Wars fought with metal tubes that threw small pieces of hot metal at each other. Weapons that could barely punch through simple armor. He had watched recordings of humans fighting each other over small pieces of land, over lines drawn on maps, over things that seemed foolish to him. He had seen humans who could not agree with each other, who fought about almost everything, who seemed to be a species always at war with itself. To Threl, this made humans perfect. A species that fought itself constantly was a species that would be easy to conquer. A species that could not agree on anything, would not agree on how to defend itself either. And more than that, the Corvette scouts had found something valuable buried deep inside human biology. Something about the human body, about the way human cells could adapt and heal and multiply, was rare in the galaxy. It was valuable. The Corvette called it the harvest. For years, the Corvette Dominion had studied hundreds of species across the stars, looking for the right kind of biological material to use for their great project, a project so old that most Corvette soldiers did not even know its full purpose. They only knew that certain species had bodies that could be used, that could be taken, that could be processed into something the Dominion needed. Most species they found were too weak, too fragile, or their bodies broke down too quickly under processing. But humans were different. Human bodies were strong. Human bodies could take punishment and keep going. Their cells replicated fast. Their blood carried compounds that the Corvette scientists could not create in any lab. Humans, it seemed, were the perfect resource. So the Dominion decided to harvest Earth. Threl Vosen had been given command of this operation because of his long history of success. He had led invasions before, though none as important as this one. He had seen dozens of worlds fall under Corvette control without much resistance. Species would see the size of the Corvette fleet, understand they could not win, and surrender. It was efficient. It was clean. Nobody had to die who did not need to die, at least not right away. He expected the same here. The plan was simple. The fleet would cross into what the humans called their solar system. They would broadcast a message of peace, offering humanity a place inside the Dominion, as workers, as farmers of their own bodies, harvested slowly and carefully, so that the population could keep producing more. If humans resisted, which Threl doubted they could do in any real way, the fleet had more than enough firepower to destroy any defense they might put up. The humans had no ships capable of leaving their own system in large numbers. They had barely reached their own moon. Threl had seen the numbers. Humanity had perhaps a few hundred combat vessels total, none of them capable of matching even a single Corvette warship. "Commander," said a voice beside him. It was Nyra Ashel, his second in command, a being from the Velkari species, tall and thin with pale gray skin. She had served with him for 3 campaigns now. "We are 2 days from the edge of their system. Scouts report no unusual activity. Human ships are patrolling their usual patterns, unaware of our approach." "Good," Threl said. "Send the signal to all ships. We proceed as planned. No weapons fire unless fired upon first. We are not here to destroy this world. We are here to harvest it." Nyra nodded and turned to relay the order. Around the bridge, other officers moved calmly between their stations. There was no fear in this fleet, no worry. They had done this before, many times, on many worlds. The Corvette Dominion had grown powerful, because it understood something simple. Most species, when faced with overwhelming force, chose to live rather than die, fighting a battle they could not win. 2 days passed. The fleet crossed the outer edge of the solar system, past the icy rocks and frozen moons that orbited far from the sun. They moved with total confidence, formations tight and organized, sensors sweeping ahead for any sign of resistance. Threl watched the reports come in. Nothing. No warning shots. No defense fleet rushing to meet them. Just silence, and the slow turning of distant worlds. "This is almost too easy," said Naira, standing at his side as they watched the main screen. "It usually is. Most species do not understand what they are facing until it is standing in front of them. By the time humanity understands, they will already know it is wiser to bend than to break." But something in the back of Threl's mind bothered him, though he could not say exactly what. It was a small thing, the kind of feeling a soldier gets after many years of service, a feeling that something was not quite right, even when everything on the screen said otherwise. He pushed the feeling aside. He had felt this way before, on other invasions, and it had always turned out to be nothing. As the fleet moved closer to Earth, past the orbit of the outer planets, the crew of the Devouring Light began preparing the broadcast that would be sent to humanity. It was the same message the Dominion had used on dozens of worlds before. A message of peace, an offer to join the Dominion, an explanation of the benefits that would come with cooperation. Threl had delivered this message himself many times. He had a talent for it, a calm and reasonable voice that made surrender sound like the smart choice rather than the fearful one. "Commander, we are picking up increased communication traffic from the human system," reported one of the sensor officers, a small four-armed being named Pricket. "Their networks are active. Lots of data moving between what appears to be military installations." "Are they aware of us?" Threl asked. Pricket checked his instruments again. "Unclear, sir. It could be normal traffic. Human communication networks are dense and constant, but there does seem to be an increase in the last several hours." Threl considered this. It was possible the humans had detected something, some faint trace of the fleet's approach. Even the best cloaking technology could sometimes be caught by a lucky sensor sweep or a suspicious pattern in the data. But even if they had noticed something, what could they do about it? Humanity had no way to stop a fleet of this size. At worst, they would panic, and panic made conquest easier, not harder. "Continue as planned," Threl ordered. "We will send the message once we are within range of their primary communication networks. Let them see the size of our fleet first. Let them understand what they are facing before we speak." The fleet continued forward, past Jupiter, past Mars, closing in on the blue and green world that was the target of this entire operation. As they moved, Threl studied the reports on human military strength one more time, wanting to be certain there were no surprises waiting. The reports were old, based on radio and data intercepts from years before, since the fleet had traveled a great distance to arrive here, and information about Earth had not been updated during the long journey. According to what he had, humanity possessed a modest number of warships, armed with kinetic weapons and simple energy shields, nothing that could seriously threaten a Corvette vessel. Their largest ships were barely the size of a Corvette escort cruiser. Their weapons technology was decades, maybe centuries, behind the Dominion's own. What Threl did not know, what none of the Corvette scouts had discovered, was that those old reports were no longer accurate. Humanity had changed a great deal since those signals were first intercepted. The years that had passed while the Corvette fleet crossed the emptiness between the stars had not been quiet years for Earth. There had been a great deal happening, much of it hidden from any outside eyes, because humanity, unlike many species the Dominion had encountered before, had learned to be very quiet about certain things. Humanity had, in fact, been watching the stars for a long time, wondering if they were truly alone, and after certain events that shook the world many years earlier, events that convinced their leaders that they were not alone and might never be safe again, humanity had begun preparing, quietly, carefully, without broadcasting their preparations to the rest of the galaxy. They built new ships, they developed new weapons, they trained new soldiers, veterans of old wars, now turned toward a new kind of enemy, one they had never seen, but always suspected might come one day. They built a border, a network of sensors and hidden defense platforms that stretched from the edge of the solar system all the way to the orbit of the moon. watching, listening, waiting. The Corvette fleet did not know about this border. Their scouts, moving quickly and quietly through the outer system months before the main fleet arrived, had somehow slipped past the outer sensor nets without triggering an alarm, or so the Corvette believed. In truth, the humans had seen the scouts long before the scouts realized they had been seen. Humanity had chosen not to react, not yet, wanting instead to see how large this threat truly was, to understand it fully before showing their hand. And so, when the great Corvette fleet crossed what would later be remembered as humanity's border, the invisible line the human defense network had drawn around their solar system, Threl Vosen believed he was crossing into an easy conquest. He was, in fact, walking directly into the greatest mistake of his very long life. The fleet crossed the border with total confidence. Alarms did sound, but not on Corvette ships. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, in a command center built into solid rock and shielded from every kind of scan the Corvette possessed, human officers watched the massive fleet appear on their screens, ship after ship, more than they had expected, larger than they had expected, and they understood immediately what this meant. This was not a scouting mission. This was not a probe testing their defenses. This was an invasion fleet, arriving to take their world. A message was sent immediately to the highest levels of human command, a short and simple message that had been prepared and rehearsed for years, in case this exact moment ever arrived. The message read, "They have crossed the border. Begin threshold protocol." Far above, unaware that his arrival had triggered a plan that humanity had spent years preparing, Threl Vosen gave the order to open a channel toward Earth. It was time, he believed, to deliver his message of peace, to offer humanity the chance to bend before they broke. He had no idea that humanity had already made its choice, long before he ever arrived, and that choice was not to bend. Deep under the surface of the moon, in the command center known as Threshold Base, General Elena Reyes stood in front of a massive screen that showed the full size of the approaching fleet. She had spent 20 years of her life preparing for a moment like this, ever since the first confirmed contact with something not of this world, an event the public had never been told about, an event that had convinced humanity's leaders that the galaxy was not empty and not friendly. "Confirm the count," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Confirmed, General," answered Major Chen, sitting at a console nearby. 1,240 vessels. Sizes range from small escort craft to what appears to be at least 6 capital ships larger than anything in our fleet. Energy readings suggest weapons systems far beyond our current technology. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Everyone there understood what these numbers meant. On paper, humanity's fleet had no chance against a force this size, but the plan they had built was never about winning a fair fight. It was about not fighting fair at all. "They are transmitting," said a communications officer. "Audio and video, on all major frequencies. It is addressed to the people of Earth." "Let it through to the world," Reyes said. "Let everyone hear what they came here to say, and record everything, every word." The message played. Threl Vosen's voice, calm and reasonable, filled screens all across the planet, in cities, in homes, in schools, on phones and televisions everywhere. He spoke slowly, choosing his words with care, the same words he had used on other worlds. "People of Earth," the voice said, "we come in peace. Though our numbers may seem large to you, we are the Corvette Dominion, and we have traveled far to speak with you. Your species has qualities that are rare and valuable, and we wish to offer you a place among the many worlds that already call the Dominion home. Resistance would be pointless, and would only bring suffering to your people. We ask you to accept our terms and join us peacefully. In exchange, you will receive protection, technology, and a place in the wider galaxy. We await your response." Across the planet, billions of people watched and listened in shock. For most of them, this was the first proof they had ever seen that aliens were real. Panic began to spread in some cities. In others, people gathered in the streets, staring up at the sky, though the fleet was far too distant to be seen with the naked eye. Governments scrambled to respond, though most of them had already been briefed, quietly, over the past several years, that this day might come. Back in Threshold Base, General Reyes turned to her staff. "Send the standard response," she said. "Buy us time." A short reply was sent back to the Corvette fleet, thanking them for their message and requesting time to consult with human leadership before giving a formal answer. It was a stalling tactic, one that both sides likely understood for what it was, but it served its purpose. While the message was being sent, deep below the surface of the Earth and hidden across dozens of secret locations around the solar system, humanity's true defense force began to move. Threl Vosen received the human response with mild amusement. "They wish for time," he said to Naira. "That is a good sign. It means they understand their position and are looking for a way to accept our offer without seeming weak in front of their own people. Species with pride often need this kind of delay." "Should we grant it?" Naira asked. "A short amount, yes," Threl said. "Let them talk among themselves. In the end, they will come to the only sensible conclusion." He did not know that while he waited patiently for a formal reply, human ships were already moving into position, not near Earth where the Corvette sensors were focused, but scattered across the outer solar system, hidden behind moons and asteroids and inside hollowed-out rocks that had been turned into hidden shipyards decades earlier. Humanity's real fleet was nothing like the small collection of patrol ships that had shown up in Corvette's scouting reports. Those ships were real, but they were only a small, visible part of a much larger force that had been built in total secrecy. The truth was this: after the first contact event many years before, humanity's governments had come together in a way the public never fully understood. Old rivalries were set aside, not because people suddenly became friends, but because a new and more frightening enemy had shown itself to be possible, and every nation understood that a divided humanity would be an easy target. Resources were pooled. Scientists from every country worked together on a single goal, preparing Earth for the day something like the Corvette fleet might arrive. They built weapons using technology recovered from the wreckage of that first strange encounter, technology far beyond anything Earth had developed on its own. They built ships in secret, hidden from any orbital eyes that might be watching, using deep space construction platforms disguised as simple mining operations. And they trained soldiers and pilots who had grown up believing they might one day have to defend their entire species, not just their country. By the time Threl Vosen's fleet crossed into the solar system, humanity had a hidden force of nearly 900 combat vessels, built with technology decades ahead of what the Corvette believed humans possessed. It was still smaller than the invading fleet, and the Corvette ships were individually far larger and more heavily armored. But humanity had something the Corvette did not expect: creativity, born from centuries of fighting wars against each other, a stubborn refusal to accept defeat, and weapons designed specifically with the Corvette Dominion in mind, built using data gathered from that first encounter years earlier. "General," said Major Chen, "Threshold Fleet reports all ships in position. They are ready on your order." Reyes looked at the screen, showing the massive Corvette fleet, still moving steadily toward Earth, confident and unhurried. She thought about the years of preparation, the sacrifices made, the secrets kept. She thought about her own daughter, safely hidden in a shelter beneath the mountains, along with millions of other children across the planet, moved there quietly over the past few days, under the excuse of a training exercise. "Not yet," Reyes said. "Let them come closer. Let them believe they have already won. We only get one chance to surprise them. We are not going to waste it." 3 more days passed. The Corvette fleet moved slowly and carefully toward Earth, taking a position just beyond the orbit of Mars, close enough to strike quickly if needed but still cautious, following standard Dominion procedure for a new conquest. Threl Vosen grew slightly impatient, waiting for a formal response from humanity, but he told himself this was normal. Species with complex governments always took time to agree among themselves. Then, on the 4th day, Earth sent its answer. It was not the answer Threl expected. The transmission was short. It showed a single woman, standing in a plain gray uniform, in front of what appeared to be a military command room. She did not smile. She did not look afraid. "This is General Elena Reyes, speaking on behalf of the people of Earth," she said. "We have received your message. Our answer is no. Humanity does not accept your offer. We will not be harvested. We will not join your dominion. This is our world, and we will defend it." The message ended. On the bridge of the devouring light, there was a moment of complete silence. Threl Vosen stared at the screen, genuinely surprised for the first time in a very long while. He had seen refusals before, rare as they were, from species with enough pride and enough weapons to believe they had a chance. Those refusals always ended the same way, with the Dominion demonstrating its overwhelming power through a short and controlled show of force, followed quickly by surrender. "They refuse," Nyra said quietly. "After seeing our numbers, they still refuse." "Perhaps they do not understand what they are facing," Threl said, though the strange feeling from before had returned, stronger now. "Or perhaps they believe they have some hidden advantage. Either way, we will need to demonstrate our strength. Prepare a controlled strike. Target one of their smaller orbital stations near their homeworld. Enough to show them what resistance will cost, without excessive destruction. We still wish to harvest this world, not destroy it." The order was given. A group of 20 Corvette ships broke away from the main fleet, moving toward Earth to carry out the demonstration strike. They moved with the same confidence the entire fleet had shown since crossing the border, expecting no real resistance, expecting only to send a clear message before returning, to wait for humanity's surrender. They never reached their target. As the 20 ships crossed the orbit of Mars, sensors across the Corvette fleet suddenly lit up with warnings. Ships were appearing where no ships had been detected before, rising from behind asteroids, emerging from cloaked positions near the outer moons, moving with speed and coordination that did not match anything in the Dominion's records on human technology. Within seconds, the 20-ship strike force was surrounded. "What is this?" Threl shouted, watching the sensor readings in disbelief. "Where did these ships come from?" "Unknown, Commander," Prekit answered, his voice shaking slightly. "They were not detected before now. Their weapon signatures do not match anything in our database. They are engaging." On the screen, small bright flashes appeared as the human ships opened fire. The strike force tried to retreat, tried to call for backup, but the human vessels moved faster than expected, striking with precision that suggested years of planning rather than a rushed defense. Within 4 minutes, all 20 Corvette ships had been destroyed. Silence fell across the bridge of the devouring light. Threl Vosen stared at the screen, at the empty space where his ships had been only moments before, and for the first time since taking command of this fleet, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Doubt. "Recall all forward scouts," he said slowly. "Bring the main fleet to full alert. It seems this species is not what our reports suggested. We may need to reconsider our approach." Nyra looked at him, her expression carefully controlled, though her eyes showed the same unease that was spreading across the entire bridge. "Commander, 20 of our best escort ships were destroyed in under 4 minutes by a force we did not even detect until it was already among us. What does this mean for the rest of the fleet?" Threl did not answer right away. He looked back at the screen, at the blue and green world still turning peacefully in the distance, no longer looking quite so easy to take as it had only a few days before. "It means," he finally said, "that we have made a serious mistake in judging this species. And it means we are about to find out exactly how serious that mistake truly is." Far below, in Threshold Base, General Reyes watched the reports come in, showing the destruction of the Corvette strike force, with a face that showed no celebration, only quiet resolve. She knew this was only the beginning. The Corvette fleet was still enormous, still more powerful ship for ship than anything humanity possessed. This first victory would not be enough, but it had proven something important. It had proven that the enemy could be surprised, could be hurt, could bleed. "Order Threshold Fleet to hold position," she said. "Let them come to us next. We will make them pay for every kilometer they try to take." Above the Earth, the Corvette fleet, still confident in its overwhelming numbers, but now cautious in a way it had never needed to be before, began preparing for a battle none of them had expected to fight. Threl Vosen called a meeting of his senior officers within the hour. The bridge of the devouring light was tense in a way none of the crew had experienced before. 20 ships lost, and not to some lucky accident, but to a coordinated attack from a hidden force that had appeared out of nowhere. It went against everything the fleet had been told about this world. "I want answers," Threl said, standing at the head of the meeting table. Around him sat his top commanders, including Nyra, the fleet's chief engineer Torvak, and the head of intelligence, a small, quiet being named Silith. How did a species we believed to have no real space fleet manage to destroy 20 of our escorts in under 4 minutes? Silith spoke first, her voice careful. Commander, I have reviewed the sensor data. The human ships that attacked our strike force were not detected by any of our long-range scans before the engagement. Their hulls appear to use some form of material or coating that scatters our sensor pulses. We believe this technology may have come from somewhere outside their own development, possibly recovered material from an unknown source. You are saying humans found something, Threl said slowly. Something not of their own making. It is possible, Commander. Their weapon signatures also do not match anything in our archives on human technology. The energy patterns are unusual, advanced, far beyond what our reports suggested they should have. Torvak, the engineer, leaned forward. If I may add, Commander, the speed and coordination of their attack suggests years, possibly decades of training and preparation. This was not a rushed defense. This was a planned trap, executed with precision. Someone knew we were coming, long before we arrived, and prepared accordingly. The room was quiet for a moment. Threl considered this information carefully. It changed everything about how he needed to view this operation. Our reports on this species were badly out of date, he finally said. We based our plans on old signals, decades old, from before whatever changed on their world. We walked into this system believing we faced a primitive species, still fighting itself with simple weapons. Instead, we face something else entirely, something that has been quietly preparing for our arrival. What are your orders, Commander? Naira asked. Threl thought for a long moment. Retreat was an option, technically, though it would mean reporting a failure back to the Dominion Council, something that had never happened in his long career. It would also mean abandoning a resource the Dominion badly wanted, a resource that could take decades to find again elsewhere. And there was his own pride to consider, though he tried not to let that weigh too heavily on his decision. We still outnumber them significantly, he said. Whatever technology they have developed, it cannot match the raw power of our full fleet. We will proceed, but with caution. No more small strike forces. We move the entire fleet forward together, using our numbers as our strength. If they wish to fight, we will let them see what a real battle against the Corvette Dominion looks like. The order was given, and the massive fleet began moving forward as one unified force, over 1,000 ships advancing together toward Earth. It was an impressive sight, filling sensor screens across the solar system, a wall of Corvette military might that had conquered dozens of worlds without ever needing to fight a battle this large. Back at Threshold Base, General Reyes watched the fleet's advance with a calm expression that hid the tension she felt inside. They are moving as one group now, Major Chen reported. No more small detachments. It seems our first strike taught them caution. Good, Reyes said. Caution will slow them down, but it will not save them. Order Threshold Fleet to begin Phase 2. Phase 2 of humanity's defense plan was something the Corvette had no way of predicting, because it relied on technology and tactics that had never before been seen by any species the Dominion had encountered. Humanity's scientists, working from technology recovered years earlier, had developed something they called disruption mines, small devices scattered across key points in the solar system, designed to remain completely invisible to standard sensors until activated. These mines did not explode in the traditional sense. Instead, they released a burst of energy that interfered with a ship's shields and weapon systems for several critical seconds, just long enough for a follow-up strike to land without resistance. As the Corvette fleet advanced past the orbit of Mars, moving through a region of space that had already been carefully seeded with these hidden devices, alarms began sounding across dozens of ships simultaneously. Commander, multiple ships reporting shield failures, Prickett said urgently. Something is interfering with our systems. We cannot identify the source. Threl's eyes narrowed. Where is it coming from? Before Prickett could answer, the human fleet appeared, rising from cloaked positions all around the advancing Corvette formation, moving in fast and firing directly at the ships whose shields had just failed. The battle that followed was unlike anything Threl had ever experienced. Ship after ship in his fleet took heavy damage in the opening moments, their defenses stripped away by the mysterious mines just before the human attack landed. Return fire. All ships, engage, Threl ordered, his voice sharp with urgency now. The Corvette fleet, though caught off guard, still had the numbers and the raw firepower to fight back. Slowly, the battle began to even out, as Corvette ships brought their own weapons to bear, and the human fleet, despite its clever tactics, began taking losses of its own. Human ships, while fast and well-armed, were still individually weaker than the larger Corvette vessels. For every Corvette ship the humans managed to disable or destroy, they lost one or two of their own in the exchange. On the bridge of the human flagship, a vessel called the Liberty, Admiral James Okonkwo watched the battle unfold with a grim expression. "We are taking losses, sir," reported his tactical officer. "The mines bought us an advantage, but their numbers are starting to tell." "Hold the line," Okonkwo said. "We are not here to win this battle in one strike. We are here to bleed them, to make them pay for every meter of space they try to take. Fall back to secondary positions and continue the fighting retreat, exactly as planned." The human fleet began pulling back in an organized manner, still fighting as they retreated, luring the Corvette fleet deeper into the solar system, toward more defensive positions that had been prepared over the years. Threl, seeing the human fleet retreating, allowed himself a moment of relief. "They are falling back," he said. "Perhaps they have realized the truth of their situation. Or perhaps," Naira said carefully, "they are leading us somewhere." Threl considered this, and the doubt from before crept back into his mind. But stopping now, with his fleet already engaged and the enemy retreating, would look like weakness in front of his own officers, and the Dominion Council would not accept a report explaining that he had halted an advance out of caution against a species with a fleet a fraction of his own size. "We continue the pursuit," he said. "Carefully. Keep the fleet in tight formation. Watch for further tricks." The pursuit continued for the next 2 days, the human fleet giving ground slowly, fighting sharp engagements before retreating further each time, always inflicting damage before pulling back. The Corvette fleet, despite its overwhelming size, found itself losing ships at a rate that Threl had never before experienced in any campaign. Small losses, a few ships here, a handful there, but they added up, and more importantly, they wore down the morale of a fleet that had never before faced real resistance. By the end of the second day, the Corvette fleet had lost nearly 90 ships, a small percentage of its total force, but a number far higher than anything in Threl's experience. And the human fleet, though also reduced, had drawn the Corvette deep into the inner solar system, closer to Earth than the Dominion fleet had originally intended to be, before securing full control of the outer defenses. "Commander," Silith reported during another tense meeting, "our losses, while not critical to our overall strength, are unprecedented for an operation of this type. Crew morale is beginning to suffer. Many soldiers have never experienced combat before. The Dominion has not fought a real war in generations." This was the truth that Threl had not wanted to fully admit to himself. The Corvette Dominion had grown powerful not through constant warfare, but through the fear its size and reputation created in other species. Most of its soldiers, despite their advanced equipment, had never actually fought a determined enemy. They had trained for conquest, not for war. Humanity, on the other hand, was a species with a long and bloody history of fighting, a history that had never truly stopped, a history that had shaped every part of its culture and military thinking for thousands of years. "We are close to their homeworld now," Threl said, looking at the tactical display. "Whatever trap they have been leading us into, we must be near its center. I want full readiness on all ships. If they intend to make their final stand here, we will meet them with everything we have." As the Corvette fleet pressed closer to Earth, the human fleet stopped its retreat and began forming a defensive line just beyond the orbit of the Moon, directly in front of Threshold Base and the deep hidden defenses that had been built there over decades. General Reyes watched the enemy fleet approach on her screens, knowing that the true battle, the one that would decide everything, was about to begin. "They have taken the bait," she said quietly to Admiral Okonkwo, who had returned to Threshold Base to coordinate the final phase of the defense. "They believe they are close to victory. Now we show them exactly how wrong they are." "The final defenses are ready?" Okonkwo asked. "All of them," Reyes confirmed. "Every weapon, every hidden platform, every reserve ship we have kept in secret for this exact moment. They crossed our border with confidence, Admiral. Let's make sure they understand, before this is over, exactly what that confidence has cost them." Above the Moon's surface, hidden defense platforms that had remained dark and silent for years, invisible to every scan the Corvette fleet had performed since entering the system, began quietly powering up, waiting for the order that would turn this battle into humanity's greatest victory, or its final defeat. The Corvette fleet arrived at the edge of the moon's orbit just as the sun was rising over the Pacific Ocean far below on Earth, though none of the beings on those ships cared much for such details. What mattered to them was the human fleet spread out before them in a wide defensive formation, waiting, unmoving, as if daring the Dominion forces to come closer. Threl Vosen stood on the bridge of the devouring light, studying the formation carefully. Something about it bothered him. The human ships were positioned strangely, not in the tight defensive clusters he would have expected, but spread wide, almost as if inviting the Corvette fleet to spread out as well, in order to engage them fully. Analysis, he said to Silith. Commander, their formation does not follow standard defensive doctrine that we have seen from any species before, she reported. It is almost as if they want us to commit our entire fleet at once, rather than approaching in careful waves. Then we will not give them what they want, Threl said. Order the fleet to advance in staged waves. First wave will test their defenses. Second and third waves will hold in reserve, until we understand what we are facing. The order was given, and a third of the Corvette fleet, still over 300 ships, began moving forward toward the waiting human line. Threl watched carefully, still troubled by that same nagging feeling that had followed him since the very first ambush days earlier. As the first wave of Corvette ships closed the distance, the human fleet finally moved, but not to attack directly. Instead, they began falling back slowly, drawing the Corvette wave forward, deeper past the moon's orbit, closer to a position directly above the lunar surface itself. They continue to retreat, Prekit reported. No offensive action yet. They are drawing us in again, Threl said, understanding now what was happening, but unable to stop the momentum of his own fleet's advance, without appearing to lose his nerve in front of the entire Dominion Council, watching the reports from home. Continue the advance, but stay alert. What Threl did not know, what no sensor on any Corvette ship had been able to detect through the entire approach, was that the surface of the moon itself had been transformed over the past 20 years into the greatest hidden weapon humanity had ever built. Deep beneath the lunar crust, connected by tunnels that stretched for hundreds of kilometers, sat an enormous network of energy weapons, powered by reactors buried so deep that no scan could detect their heat signature through the layers of rock above them. This was Threshold Protocol. The plan General Reyes had ordered activated the very moment the Corvette fleet crossed humanity's border 5 days earlier. As the first wave of Corvette ships passed directly over the moon's surface, chasing the retreating human fleet, General Reyes gave the final order: fire. The surface of the moon seemed to come alive. Hundreds of hidden weapon platforms, disguised as simple rock formations and craters, opened fire simultaneously, sending beams of concentrated energy directly upward into the exposed underside of the Corvette fleet. Ships that had never expected an attack from below, from a source their sensors had been unable to detect through solid rock, took catastrophic damage in the opening seconds of the assault. On the bridge of the devouring light, alarms exploded across every console at once. Commander, we are under attack from the lunar surface. Multiple ships reporting critical damage. 2 capital ships have lost primary shields entirely. Threl stared at the screen in horror, as ship after ship in his first wave took heavy fire from a source he had never even considered as a threat. The moon, he said quietly. They built their weapons into the moon itself. Orders, Commander? Naira asked urgently. Pull the first wave back immediately. Full retreat from lunar space. Threl shouted, but even as the order was given, he knew it might be too late for many of the ships now caught in the crossfire between the lunar weapons below and the human fleet that had turned to engage them directly above. The battle that followed was chaotic and brutal. Corvette ships, caught between 2 lines of fire, tried desperately to retreat while returning fire against the human fleet, now pressing the attack from the front. The human ships, though smaller and fewer in number, fought with a coordination and aggression that stunned the Corvette crews, many of whom had never experienced real combat before this campaign began. Where Corvette soldiers had trained for the appearance of war, for parades and shows of force meant to intimidate rather than fight, human pilots and soldiers had trained their entire lives, drawing on centuries of accumulated military knowledge, and a species-wide understanding that survival sometimes meant fighting an enemy that could not be reasoned with. Within 20 minutes, the first wave of 300 Corvette ships had been reduced to less than 100, most of those heavily damaged and struggling to retreat back toward the main fleet still waiting further out. "Bring forward the second and third waves," Threl ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, and something that felt uncomfortably close to fear, an emotion he had not experienced in centuries of service. "We will overwhelm their position with sheer numbers if we must." But even as the order was given, more alarms began sounding across the fleet. The human ships that had fought the first wave began performing something the Corvette sensors had never recorded before: a rapid retreat, combined with the release of a strange cloud of particles that spread quickly through the battle space, interfering with long-range sensors and communication across the entire Corvette formation. "Commander, we are losing coordination between ships," Prickett reported, panic creeping into his voice. "The particle cloud is disrupting our communication network. Ships cannot receive updated tactical data. We are being forced to fight independently." This was, in fact, exactly the outcome humanity's military planners had hoped for. The Corvette Dominion's greatest strength was its coordinated numbers, ships acting together under centralized command to overwhelm any enemy through sheer combined force. Break that coordination, and the fleet became a collection of individual ships, each one now facing human vessels one-on-one, in engagements where Corvette technological advantages mattered less than the skill and aggression of the crews involved. "Second and third waves, advance regardless," Threl ordered, refusing to consider retreat even as the situation grew worse by the minute. "We still hold the numbers advantage. Push forward and overwhelm their position." The remaining 600 ships of the Corvette fleet surged forward into the battle, and for a time, their sheer numbers began to turn the tide. Human ships, though skilled and well-prepared, could not fight forever against a force that outnumbered them so heavily. Losses on both sides mounted rapidly. Explosions lit up the space around the moon like a new and terrible constellation, ships from both sides being torn apart by weapons fire, their wreckage adding to the growing debris field that now surrounded the battle. In Threshold Base, General Reyes watched the casualty reports with a face carved from stone, though inside, she felt the weight of every lost ship, every lost crew, pressing down on her.
"Admiral, our losses are approaching 40%,
Major Chen reported grimly. "The Corvette numbers are beginning to overwhelm our forward lines. Deploy the reserve fleet," Reyes ordered. "All remaining ships, including the ones held back at Earth orbit. This is the moment we have been preparing for. There is no reason to hold anything back now." Every remaining human warship, including vessels that had been kept in reserve near Earth itself for planetary defense, surged forward to join the battle. This final reserve included the newest and most advanced ships in humanity's fleet, vessels equipped with weapons technology that had only recently completed testing, kept secret even from most of the crews who would soon operate them for the first time in actual combat. As these fresh ships arrived, the balance of the battle began to shift once more. Corvette ships, already worn down from hours of continuous fighting, found themselves facing a renewed and powerful human assault, just as their own numbers had begun to thin from the earlier losses. On the bridge of the devouring light, Threl Vosen watched his tactical display with growing horror, as ship after ship of his once mighty fleet either fell silent or exploded outright. The numbers that had seemed so overwhelming just hours before now told a very different story. Losses had climbed past 400 ships, communication remained scattered and unreliable, and the human fleet, though also badly hurt, showed no sign of surrendering or retreating. "Commander," Naira said, her voice quiet but firm, "we must consider withdrawal. If we continue at this rate, we risk losing the entire fleet." Threl stared at the screen for a long moment, the pride of centuries of unbroken success warring within him against the plain evidence in front of his eyes. He thought of the Dominion Council, of how a retreat would be viewed, of everything he had built his reputation upon. But he also thought of his crew, of the thousands of soldiers under his command who had trusted him to lead them, and who were now dying in a battle he had walked them into with false confidence. "Order all ships," he finally said, his voice heavy, "to disengage and regroup at the outer marker. We are pulling back." It was, though none aboard the devouring light knew it yet, an order that had come far too late to save the fleet from what was still to come. The order to disengage spread through what remained of the Corvette fleet, but pulling back from a battle already this deep and this chaotic was far harder than giving the order suggested. Ships tried to turn and retreat while still under fire, some colliding with wreckage from earlier in the battle, others caught by human strike craft that refused to let their damaged enemies simply slip away. On the bridge of the devouring light, Threl Vosen watched the retreat unfold with a grim expression, counting the losses as they came in. Of the original fleet of over 1,200 ships, barely 500 remained combat-capable, and even those were showing serious damage after the hours of fighting. It was a defeat unlike anything the Corvette Dominion had suffered in generations, perhaps in its entire long history of conquest. "Commander, the human fleet is not pursuing," Briquet reported, a note of confusion in his voice. "They appear to be holding position near the moon, rather than chasing our retreat." Threl considered this. It made sense, in a strange way. The humans had fought this entire battle defensively, using their prepared positions and hidden weapons to their fullest advantage. Chasing his retreating fleet into open space would mean abandoning those advantages, fighting on ground that no longer favored them. Whoever commanded the human fleet understood the value of a battle already won, and had no need to risk further losses chasing a beaten enemy. "Continue the withdrawal," Threl said. "Get us clear of their system entirely. We will regroup at the rally point beyond the outer system boundary." As the remaining Corvette fleet limped away from Earth, Threl found himself alone in his private quarters for the first time in days, staring at a report that listed the final numbers of the battle. 700 ships lost, tens of thousands of soldiers dead. An operation that had been expected to end in a peaceful surrender within days had instead become the worst military disaster in the recorded history of the Corvette Dominion. He thought about what would happen when he returned home, when he had to explain this defeat to the Dominion Council. He thought about the humans, about how badly his intelligence reports had failed to prepare him for what this species had truly become, and he thought, with a growing sense of dread, about what this meant for the future. Humanity was not some primitive species that could be quietly conquered and forgotten. They had built weapons hidden inside their own moon. They had trained a fleet in complete secrecy, waiting patiently for years for an enemy they were not even certain would ever arrive. They had done all of this not out of aggression, but out of a deep and practical understanding that the galaxy was a dangerous place, and that survival required preparation. The Corvette Dominion had grown used to easy victories, to species that surrendered, rather than fight a battle they could not win. Humanity had refused to follow that pattern, and now, because of that refusal, humanity's existence, along with the location of their homeworld and the strength of their defenses, was about to become known across a wider portion of the galaxy than anyone on Earth might have wished. But that was a problem for another day. For now, Threl Vosen had a fleet to save, and a defeat to somehow survive. As the Corvette fleet reached the edge of the solar system, preparing to make the long journey back through the dark, a final message arrived from Earth, broadcast on the same frequency the original peace offer had used days before. It was General Reyes again, standing in the same plain uniform, her expression calm but firm. "To the commander of the Corvette fleet," she said, "you came here with an offer, and we gave you our answer. You crossed our border with confidence. I hope, as you leave, you understand exactly what that confidence has cost you. This is our home. We built it, we fought for it, and we will always defend it. Should your dominion ever consider returning, know that what you faced today was only a fraction of what humanity is capable of preparing. Go in peace, or do not come back at all. The choice is yours." Threl listened to the message in silence, standing alone in his quarters, the weight of the defeat settling fully upon him now that the immediate danger of battle had passed. He did not respond. There was nothing left to say that would change what had happened, and no words that could undo the losses his fleet had suffered. Not every ship in the Corvette fleet managed to make the retreat successfully. Some, too badly damaged to continue the journey home, were abandoned along the way, their crews evacuating into small emergency lifeboats, hoping to be picked up by other ships still capable of travel. Dozens of these lifeboats drifted through the outer solar system in the days following the battle, carrying survivors of a fleet that had arrived expecting an easy conquest and left instead, as a broken, humbled force, fleeing the very world it had come to harvest. Some of these lifeboats were found by human patrol ships, sent out quietly in the aftermath of the battle to search for survivors, both human and Corvette. General Reyes had given clear orders on this matter, orders that surprised some of her officers given the circumstances. "Rescue any survivors you find, human or otherwise," she had said. "We won this battle because we prepared, not because we are cruel. Let the galaxy know that humanity fights fiercely when threatened, but does not abandon the helpless once the fighting has ended. That reputation may serve us better in the long run than fear ever could." And so human ships collected the surviving Corvette soldiers from their lifeboats, treating their wounds and holding them not as prisoners of war exactly, but as guests, whose fate would be decided through careful negotiation once the dust of battle had settled. Among those rescued was a young Corvette officer named Vesic, who had served on one of the ships destroyed during the fighting near the moon. He had expected to be treated harshly, perhaps even executed, given everything he had been taught about how conquered species typically behave toward captured enemies. Instead, he found himself given medical care, food, and eventually, the chance to speak directly with human officers who wanted to understand more about the Dominion he had served. "Why do you help us?" Vesic asked one of his human guards, an older soldier named Sergeant Dade, "after we came to harvest your world." Dade considered the question for a moment before answering. "Because how we treat you now says more about who we are than the battle we just won," he said. "We fought because you gave us no choice, but that doesn't mean we have to become monsters to do it." Word of the battle, and of humanity's treatment of the survivors, eventually spread beyond Earth, carried by trade routes and communication networks that stretched across the parts of the galaxy the Corvette Dominion had long controlled. Other species, some of whom had lived under Dominion rule for generations, began to hear whispers of a small, distant world that had not only resisted a Corvette invasion fleet, but had defeated it decisively, sending the survivors home in escape pods rather than as trophies of war. Back on Earth, life slowly began to return to something resembling normal, though nothing would ever truly be the same again. The public now knew, beyond any doubt, that humanity was not alone in the universe, and that the universe was not always a friendly place. Governments that had once kept the truth hidden now had to explain years of secrecy to a public demanding answers. But alongside the fear and the questions, there was also a quiet sense of pride, a recognition that when the moment of truth had finally arrived, humanity had not simply survived. It had won. General Reyes stood once more in Threshold Base, now looking not at a screen showing an approaching enemy fleet, but at a quiet report detailing the slow rebuilding effort already underway, repairing damaged ships, honoring the dead, and preparing for whatever might come next. Admiral Okonkwo stood beside her, both of them looking tired in a way that went far beyond simple physical exhaustion. "Do you think they will come back?" Okonkwo asked quietly. Reyes thought about the question for a long moment before answering. "Maybe not the Corvette, not for a long while at least. We hurt them badly, and pride like theirs takes a long time to heal enough to try again. But someone else might come, someday. The galaxy is a big place, and we've just announced ourselves to it in a very loud way." "Then we keep preparing," Okonkwo said. "We keep preparing," Reyes agreed. "That's what we do now. That's what we'll always do." Far beyond the edge of the solar system, the broken remains of the Corvette invasion fleet continued their slow journey home, carrying with them a lesson that would echo through the halls of the Dominion for generations to come. They had come to a small, quiet world at the edge of known space, expecting an easy harvest of a primitive and divided species. Instead, they had found a united and determined people who had spent years quietly preparing for exactly this moment. A people who valued their freedom enough to fight for it, against odds that should have guaranteed their defeat. They had crossed humanity's border with confidence. They left in lifeboats, carrying home the true story of what happened when the Corvette Dominion finally met a species that refused to be harvested. And far below, on a small blue and green world that had just proven itself far stronger than anyone in the galaxy had ever expected, humanity turned its eyes back toward the stars, no longer wondering if they were truly alone, but instead beginning to wonder what other challenges might still be waiting out there in the vast and endless dark.